Hey, drug class or public service, depending on how you look at it. I've got a little bit to say about the sedatives and the inhalants. We're really just going to focus on some rather depressant uh, strategies, really. I want to get a feel for the fact that a lot of these are simply in the same category because they're administered the same way, kind of uh, a bunch of platypi, if you will. It's not that they're uh, sharing a whole lot of common effects so much as they're just all administered in the same way. But part of the intriguing uh, aspects of the inhalants is that they're involved with anesthetics. Obviously, we saw some local anesthesia with cocaine and things like that, but these were inhaled in an effort to try to make some progress with surgery. And then we'll get into the barbiturates and the sedative hypnotics, the development of benzodiazepines because of the lethality of the barbiturates, concerns about GHB, and then discussing, sort of who's at risk, what are the patterns of abuse, and if we get a chance, we'll get into societal responses. Oh, so here's just what I was saying. We're gonna go all the way back in history to get a feel for this. Hoping to have you just get a feel for the acute and chronic effects, but the acute effects are remarkably like alcohol, a drug some of you seem to have some familiarity with. Benzos were literally developed to just enhance GABA functioning, so they'd have that impact on anxiety without having the lethality that barbiturates create. Anxiolytics in general, I'm going to harp on the psychotherapy for anxiety, and as we saw before, even the impact of regular aerobic exercise on anxiety is pretty impressive. GHB is not as popular as it once was, but it's also got some lethality, can be inhaled, and seems to be a drug of abuse, and we'll go from there. Oh, so the early inhalants, this is an intriguing history and one I just focus on literally going back to the Oracle at Delphi. So we're talking about in ancient Greece when folks would travel a long way and they would get to the Oracle at Delphi. It looks like there may have been some petrochemical fumes, oil and natural gas coming up, and whoever was the Oracle who essentially had to say things to folks in an effort to explain their futures to them may have been intoxicated by this, or the people who were hearing about their future may have been intoxicated, which may have put them in a certain kind of trance. When I read about these, it's a lot of Barnum statements and a lot of ambiguous stuff. So apparently, the oracle would say things like, "Oh, yes, something important might happen," or "If you're not careful, something bad might happen," or "You're the kind of person who has a quiet exterior but a tumultuous interior," right? Things that are kind of true for everybody or unfalsifiable or impossible to make sense of. And truth be told, newspaper astrology kind of does this as well, where you look down and it's just something that would apply to anybody. I'm not sure if the Oracle at Delphi had any divine insights into how history was going to play out, but this notion that a trance could be induced by a gas suddenly had some explanation for this and also didn't seem to dawn on humans until markedly later. So by the mid to late 1700s, Jason Priestley's the one who was on 90210, right? Joseph Priestley had basically been playing with various compounds of nitrogen, putting nitrogen on various metals, and essentially extracted nitrous oxide. Humphrey Davy gets credit for really doing the big formal research for it. In 1798, he had a big leather bag. He used a cow stomach and would hold the nitrous in there and would inhale it for science sake. And you say, oh, it's 1798, and Sir Humphrey Davy, in the Royal Academy of Science. But in 1798, Humphrey Davy was like 19 years old. I'm guessing that this was more of a little nitrous party. He brought his buddies over, and then you look at his journal entries, and he did suggest that there may have been some implications for surgery, but he sure as hell wasn't doing it. And then, truth be told, surgery at the time was a frightening thing. So, Robert Liston was like a pretty famous surgeon in the 1800s, and he was known for cutting somebody's leg off in 2.5 minutes. He cut people's legs off so fast that unfortunately he inadvertently cut off somebody's testicle. He cut off an assistant's finger by accident one time. And then basically the guy died and the assistant died, so it was a 200% mortality rate for the surgery. Like, it was really a different world. And in fact, if you go visit like hospitals from the old days that have become museums, you'll see the surgery place is way off to the side or way in the back or basically far from the main parts, so that you couldn't hear the screaming. Folks would go in and then they'd be sent up on like a dumbwaiter. Literally, there were no stairs, so they couldn't run away. You get up there, you see sawdust and blood on the ground and realize, there's 10 guys there to hold you down while they, cut off a tumor or a gangrenous foot or something like that. And it was just a horrible time. This was before Semmelweis and some of the appreciations we had for theories about germs and infection and things like that. People at the time were like, oh, Louis Pasteur's theory of germs is an explanatory fiction. Little things that we can't see, that's ridiculous. Humans, we know all, right? Of course, people were dying from all kinds of ridiculous infections as a result of even some of the most minor surgeries. So at least it was nice to have some kind of alternative anesthetic. Locally, cocaine was not a big deal then. Basically, back then you either got drunk or you maybe were lucky enough to find a sponge that had been soaked in laudanum, like opium and alcohol, and sucked on that while people, excised whatever it was. There was no brain surgery. Nobody opened up your chest cavity or stomach back then, at least not formerly in medical trained settings. But suddenly folks who actually gave a shit about human pain started trying to make a move towards that. So despite Sir Humphrey Davy's efforts, things didn't really catch on with nitrous until Horace Wells in 1844. He saw the demo in 1844. He was like at a party where some dude who had dropped out of med school was like going around the country giving people nitrous, and it was like the old hypnosis shows basically. So people are watching this guy give nitrous to other people and have them jump around and do shit. And so some guy who was at the party like barked his shin on a chair or something like that, and then didn't remember, and it didn't hurt at the time. So Horace Wells was totally down with this and begged the guy for some of the nitrous. Took it the next day. He actually had a practice with Morton. He had a dental practice with the guy who's really known for ether, and then had him yank his tooth out. I hope he needed to have the tooth removed. I gotta look into that. And they were like, okay, this is gonna be great. This is gonna help people. And like Horace Wells was a great guy and like tried to get children to come to the dentist, which was kind of a novel idea at the time, and to have a regular dental visit, so like for prevention rather than waiting until your tooth was rotting in your head. And then unfortunately, like he went to Mass General to sort of show off nitrous oxide as an anesthetic, and was about to yank a guy's tooth out, but they rushed him. At the time, it was like theater. Like you'd literally go to this place and like watch people do surgery, like for a night out. It's kind of sick when we look back on it now, but hey, different standards. And so poor Horace Wells is rushed. He had just bought this new way to administer the nitrous, and it really hadn't had enough time to work. So he yanks the tooth out, and the guy yells, ouch. And so the audience all yells, humbug, humbug, which I guess is what you yelled back in the 1840s. And so poor Horace Wells, like later the guy was like, oh, I didn't even know you pulled it out, and it didn't hurt and stuff like that. But the fact that he yelled ouch at the time, like, wrecked it. And then poor Horace Wells, like his whole life starts falling apart. And like he stops his dental practice, and he decides he's gonna try to be an art dealer, and basically like everything's going awry. And then he gets all strung out on chloroform, and so he's really bummed out. He goes to the mental hospital, and like they try to take care of him, and he says, let me just go home and get my razor. And of course he goes home and gets his razor and slices a vein in his leg and ends up committing suicide. And then like 2 days later, people find out that like the French were awarding him this wonderful award for being a pioneer in anesthesia and stuff like that. So don't kill yourself. You never know when you're going to get an award from France. Meanwhile, chloroform's going on in the around that same time. And it's strange because chloroform was also this inhalant drug that had the potential to have an anesthetic, but certainly would put people out. But it's not like it is in the movies or in crime novels where you just uh, put it on a hanky and put it over somebody's face and they pass out immediately. You got to have like regular administration and long-term inhalation. And truth be told, just don't do it. Like all of these are just nasty. Um, and then ether was developed by Frederick Hoffman. Let's not even worry about him because we're going to get mixed up with the Hoffman from LSD. But let's give Morton the credit. So Morton did a surgical demo in 1846. So after Wells went and kind of botched everything with nitrous, Morton went and also he ended up taking a tumor off this dude's neck, and the the doctor who was presenting it all said, "Gentlemen, this is no humbug," kind of calling back to poor Horace Wells. And then Morton's life was kind of a mess. It was hard to make a living back then. So I know he had a bunch of other things where he was trying to sell showers and things like that. Like it was just the 1840s, not an easy time to live. Oh, it's just we happen to be recording in April, so I couldn't help but. Here's a cartoon about the Easter Bunny, but the guy meant the Easter Bunny. Well, so what is the deal with the abuse potential of the inhalants? Odds are high there's a sedating, alcohol-like subjective effect, and it's relatively rapid because, as we've seen with the inhalation of anything, chemical goes into your lungs and then that blood goes right to your brain and heart. So the intoxication is relatively quicker. The packaging itself is easy to carry around and conceal. And I mean, it's just horrifying how we've got these industrial inhalants that are incredibly toxic, but do create some of these effects. And so, gee, who are the people who are at most at risk? Lower class kids, kids in South America who are on the street. They have some anorectic effects. They fight hunger, so gee, you're starving, and you can buy shoe polish, or you could buy a bag of pork rinds. Which one's going to last longer? Like, just terrible, terrible sets of problems. And then they do tend to increase problems with the brain. So, oh man, it's just not a drug of abuse that you want to mess with. And then they're ubiquitous, right? We gotta have some of these solvents and things like that. So it's hard to take them off the market. Try to make it clear that they're dangerous, but people end up in hard times and abusing them, or they just don't know any better. So please spread the word. They're cheap and easy to steal. So often they are in small bottles or small packages. So it becomes an issue that, yeah, if you're a teenage shoplifter, this is a thing that can be your target. So let's keep that in mind when we start talking about the prevention efforts. With that in mind, nitrous is, of course, used as an aid in whipping cream. For a while, there was, oh God, every time you went to a fancy restaurant, there was some kind of foam. It was, whipped cream with spinach in it, whipped cream with something like blah. It was just really, even if you weren't a vegan, it would have grossed you out. But it was really trendy and hip. When my brother managed a kitchen, he would go into the fridge and none of the whipped cream bottles worked. He would just fire everybody. Like it was really nuts. But these are available. Like you can get this on Amazon or whatever, and people use it recreationally. The long-term data are often confounded in humans because folks who do this also do a whole bunch of other drugs. But this can't be good for you. Why does it make you laugh? Well, your brain is basically taking the blood that has nitrous now instead of oxygen. So it's NO. The O part gets into the hemoglobin as if it were oxygen, but it's not. And so that gets carried around. So your brain is like, hey, open your mouth because I can't breathe. It's not funny, right? You're just basically doing all you can to get more oxygen into your system. Oh man, there's got to be a better way to go. Well, with that in mind, we have a plethora of household products with pretty much the widest variety you can imagine of things that have been abused as inhalants I'm worried that this file isn't gonna store, so I'm gonna go ahead and end this right here, and I'll do the next inhalants video in just a second. Thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate your help, and go ahead and move to the next video.